Okay, this is video 1 called Getting Your Bearings. So in this video we're going to talk about 3 things: directional terms, regional terms, and we're going to do a brief introduction to the skeleton. So first of all, directional terms. So what are directional terms? Directional terms allow us to talk about where we're talking on the body. So in order to study anatomy, we need to lay down some base terms so that we're using the same terms and so that we know what these mean. So like, for instance, if you were looking at a map and you didn't know, if you didn't have a legend on the map and you didn't know which way was north and which way was south, and you didn't know what meant water and what meant mountains, the map would be essentially meaningless. And that's kind of the idea here. So we're getting some terms that allow us to discuss what area of the body we're talking about, or where things are in relationship to other things. So those are the directional terms. So before we actually go through the directional terms, we need to define one thing, which is the anatomical position. Anatomical position is the assumed position that the subject is in, the subject that's being observed. So anatomical position is that the subject is standing, facing the observer, arms by their sides, palms forward. Okay, so that's anatomical position. So we're going to go over to my assistant here and look at anatomical position, and then we'll look at our different directional terms also. So here's my assistant, my model. He is standing in anatomical position, right? So he's facing the observer, arms by the sides. Imagine that he's palms forward. That's anatomical position. So all of these directional terms assume anatomical position regardless of what position the subject is actually in. So the subject may be laying on a table or standing on their head or doing a cartwheel, but these terms all refer to the subject as if they're in anatomical position. Okay, so let's look at these terms. And the terms go in pairs, much like yin and yang. So for instance, the first 2 terms we're looking at are superior and inferior. And there is no, superior that it just is superior. It's superior in relationship to something else. Like something is yin in relationship to something else that may be more yang. So they're paired terms, and each needs both parts of that pair in order to define itself. So the first 2 are superior and inferior. So superior refers to toward the head. That's superior. Its opposite is inferior, which is downward or toward the feet. Not necessarily, it's more or less like on the trunk, the head and trunk. Superior is going to be toward the head, inferior is going to be downward. So inferior. So superior is up toward the head, inferior is down in the opposite direction. So humans are bipeds, so we stand up on 2 feet, so superior is toward the head and inferior is toward the feet. But there's another set of terms that goes right with superior and inferior, and that's cranial. Cranial refers to toward the head, the cranium, and caudal refers to toward the tail. So cranial and caudal are similar to superior and inferior. So cranial's toward the head, caudal's toward the tail, referring to like the tailbone. So if the coccyx was here in the skeleton, we're moving in that direction for caudal. Okay, superior and inferior. Next 2, let's do medial and lateral. So for medial and lateral, let's assume we have this imaginary line going down the middle, which is our midline. So then medial refers to toward the midline. And its opposite, lateral, means away from the midline. Okay, medial is toward the midline, lateral is away from the midline. And we can use these terms in relationship to parts of the body. So we might have acupuncture points that we're talking about, and one might be medial, located here, compared to another one that's located here. So this first point is medial compared to this one, or this one is lateral compared to that one. So we use the terms to kind of compare things. So superior, inferior, medial, lateral. Let's look at proximal and distal. So proximal and distal are terms that are used on the limbs. So proximal is more toward the trunk. And distal is away from the trunk toward the extremities. And we use proximal and distal on the arms and on the legs. So proximal is toward the trunk, distal is toward the extremities. Let's look at another set of terms. Let's pretend that we can cut him open here. Here's some like flaps of skin that we've cut open. Okay, and now we're looking inside the body here through this window. So our next terms are are superficial and deep. So superficial is toward the surface. And deep is toward the interior, or toward the core. Let's see, how can I write this? Let's see, it's a different color. Okay, so deep is a deeper layer, deeper into the body. So superficial toward the surface, deep toward the core. Our next set of terms are anterior and posterior. Anterior refers to the front of the body. Okay, so we're looking at the front here. This is anterior. Posterior refers to the back of the body. So around the back, that's posterior. Okay, posterior is the back, anterior is the front. One more set of terms, I believe. Ipsilateral and contralateral. So ipsilateral comes from the word part ipsi, which means same, and lateral, which refers to side. So ipsilateral refers to things that are on the same side of the body. So we might so in acupuncture, the way this comes up often is we might needle something ipsilaterally. In other words, we'll use the point that's on the same side of the body where the pain is occurring. That's an example where we might use the term ipsilateral. So the point and the pain are ipsilateral to each other, or we needle ipsilaterally to the pain. The opposite of ipsilateral, so ipsilateral will say, like, two things on the same side of the body are ipsilateral. Whereas contralateral, the opposite word, contra, means opposite. And lateral still means side. So contralateral refers to things on the opposite side. So we might have something on this side of the body, on the subject's left side, and something else on the subject's right side. Those 2 points or areas would be contralateral to each other. They're on opposite sides of the body. Okay, so those are our directional terms. Superior toward the head. Also, we could use cranial as toward the head. Inferior toward the tail, or caudal toward the tail. What else? What do we do next? Medial is toward the midline of the body. Lateral is away from the midline of the body. Proximal and distal are used on the limbs. Proximal is toward the trunk. Distal is toward the extremities. Anterior refers to the front of the body. Posterior refers to the back of the body. Ipsilateral refers to two things on the same side of the body. Contralateral refers to things on the opposite, one thing on one side, one thing on the other side of the body. And superficial and deep. Superficial is toward the surface. Deep is toward the core. So those are our directional terms. We'll use them to refer to areas of the body that we're talking about. We'll use them also in our movement terms that are coming up next or soon. Okay, so that's it for section 1 of video 1. Okay, here is the second section of video 1. So in this section we're covering regional terms. So this is my assistant, Essie. Say hi.
Hi.
And we're going to look at regional terms on her body. Okay, and so first of all, what are regional terms? Regional terms are terms that we use to refer to an area of the body. A whole lot of them are based on they're either based on Greek, which is often the name of the bones in that part of the body. So the bone or bones in that part of the body. They're not all named for that, but a whole lot of them are. Okay, so let's do some regional terms. Okay, what do we have here? So our first one is cranial. Cranial refers to the head, the cranium. Okay, can we turn so we can see that term? Can we see it? Cranial. Okay, cranial refers to the head. Our next term is facial. You know this term already. Facial refers to the face. Like, I'm going to go get a facial. Okay, that refers to the face. Next term, cervical. Cervical refers to the neck. So anywhere in this region, we could say this is cervical. Very often we're referring to the cervical vertebra when we use the term cervical, but the cervical muscles or whatever, the cervical region. Thoracic is the rib cage area. So again, a lot of times we're referring to the thoracic spine when we use the term thoracic, but not all the time. You know, this whole region where the rib cage is thoracic. Our next term is lumbar. So lumbar, again, refers to this low back area, and we'll often, and of course we'll use this term lumbar. Can you step away a little bit so we can see the word? There we go. The word lumbar to refer to the lumbar vertebra, but again, this whole region, so like the muscles of this area are also lumbar area, or they're in the lumbar area. Below lumbar, we have sacral, and below sacral, we have coccygeal. So cervical, thoracic, lumbar, sacral, and coccygeal are the parts of the spine, and the regions around that area. So let's see. See those? There we go. Thoracic, lumbar, sacral, coccygeal. Our next term is dorsal. So dorsal refers to back. So all of these, this whole area is the dorsum or the back. So that's dorsal. We also use that term dorsal to refer to the back of the hand. You would turn back around. So the back of the hand is dorsal. And we use that term to refer to the top of the foot. So, top of the foot is dorsal. Dorsal. Okay. What's next? We have some terms on the front of the body. Pectoral refers to the chest. Right, pectoral muscles there, pectoralis major, pectoralis minor, but pectoral refers to chest, abdominal refers to the abdomen, or the belly region, so below the rib cage and above the pelvic region. Axillary is the armpit. What else? Brachial refers to the upper arm, brachial, and antebrachial refers to the forearm. Okay, that's antebrachial. There are other terms in here. So antebrachial is this whole area, but if we need to break it down more, we might talk about the radial aspect and the ulnar aspect. So talking about the specific bones that are in here, radial and ulnar, but the whole region, we could say antebrachial, which means before the arm. So it's the forearm. Cubital is a term we use to refer to the elbow area. Cubital. And in front of the cubital, just like antebrachial is in front or before the brachial region, in front of the cubital region, we have the antecubital region, which is the like the inside elbow crease area. A lot of these terms we don't use very much, but some of them we do. Okay. Carpal refers to the wrist area, so again referring to the bones in that area, carpal. And we've already talked about how the back of the hand, we'll use the term dorsal to refer to the back of the hand. The palm side, the front of the hand, we'll use the word palmar. I know, huh? We're okay. And then more on the hands, and same on the feet, is digital. So the digits, the fingers and the toes, we use the same term, digits or digital. And then we have the pelvic region. So the pelvic region is this whole bony area that makes up the pelvis, and we can break that down into individual parts. One individual part we'll break it down into is the pubic region, which is the front of the pelvic region. And as we get into learning more about the pelvis, we'll get all of those individual terms. Inguinal refers to this crease between the thigh and the abdomen. That's the inguinal region or the inguinal fold. So anything in that area is referred to as inguinal, like there are inguinal lymph nodes there, for instance. Our next term we have is femoral, which refers to the thigh. Can we see these? Thigh area is femoral or femoral, referring to the femur, the bone in there. The knee or the front of the knee is referred to as patellar. So again, referring to the bone there, referring to the patella. The back part of the knee is called the popliteal region. Popliteal, okay. The lower leg, so from the knee to the ankle, is called crural. So this whole area from the knee to the ankle is crural. More specifically there, the calf part is we use the term sural. So that's the calf back there. Okay, I think we can see it, more or less. Tarsal refers to the ankle, so again referring to the bones in the ankle and the top of the foot region. That's tarsal. Couple terms left here. Pedal refers to foot. And, whoops. Our last term here, and then we have another section of terms, but our last one is plantar, which is the bottom of the foot. So can you step on that for me? Mm-hmm. Plantar is bottom of the foot. There we go. Okay. So those, and then we have some more specific terms for like around the head and stuff. But here are some of the terms we put on SE today. Okay? All right, now let's look at some terms more specific to the head. So a few more terms that refer to parts of the head. One is ocular. So ocular refers to the eye area. One that I think I left off with the page, but I can add it, is nasal, which refers to the nose. Auricular refers to ears. Oral refers to mouth. The chin area is called the mentum. And we could say this whole jawbone area is the maxillary region. Cheeks. So like here, cheek area is buccal. Let's see, what else? Oh, lingual. Oh, we have to draw a tongue on this guy. There's his tongue, and that's lingual. Occipital. We can't see his occipital region. Occipital is the back of the head. So like the part that rests on the pillow when you lay down on your back, that's occipital. Temporal, through here, the temporal region. You may be familiar with these terms. We'll talk about different types of headaches, as an ocular headache or a temporal headache. Frontal refers to, so temporal is referring to the temporal bone. Frontal also refers to the frontal bone. So just like the regional terms in the rest of the body, oftentimes they're referring to the bones in that area. Let's see, what else? Do we get them all? Ocular, auricular, buccal, lingual, mental, mandibular, oral, occipital, temporal, frontal. Oh, and vertex. Vertex is the top of the head here. So there, that is vertex. Okay, top of the head is vertex. Okay, those are some regional terms on the head. One last section of video 1. So we talked about our directional terms, we defined anatomical position, and we talked about regional terms. And we just need to kind of get our bearings on the skeleton here a little bit. So
I love my mom. She's amazing.
Okay, so we have a couple of two sections to the skeleton. We can divide the skeleton into two sections. One section is the axial skeleton. Oh, let's see here. So the axial skeleton is the central part, like the axis of a wheel. The central part of the skeleton is the axial skeleton. So that includes the spine and the rib cage and the skull, which I don't have all of the skull right here, but okay, the skull, the spine, the rib cage, that's the axial skeleton. Axial skeleton. Now, there's another section or other sections of the skeleton, and those are the extremities or the appendages. So the appendages are attached to the axial skeleton via girdles. So we have a shoulder girdle and we have a pelvic girdle. So the shoulder girdle and pelvic girdle attach the extremities or the limbs or the appendages to the axial skeleton, but they are not part of the axial skeleton. Okay, so the shoulder girdle is the scapula and the clavicle. Okay, the scapula and the clavicle make up the shoulder girdle, and they attach the upper extremity, which is the arm here, to the axial skeleton. Okay, so let's see. This is a left arm. Okay, so like this. So that's part of the appendicular skeleton. The shoulder girdle and the upper extremity are appendicular skeleton. And then, of course, there's the lower extremity. So we have part of the lower extremity here. So the lower extremity is the leg, and it attaches to the axial skeleton via the pelvic girdle. So the pelvic girdle and the lower extremity are also part of the appendicular skeleton. Okay, so the axial skeleton is the skull, the spine, and the rib cage. The appendicular skeleton is the extremities and the girdles. So the girdles attach the extremities to the axial skeleton, and they're kind of the joining point between the axial skeleton and the limbs. But both the girdles and the limbs are the appendicular skeleton. Okay, two main sections: axial and appendicular skeleton. All right, so that is it for video 1. Your response to video 1 is the word skeleton. So in the section on Populi where you're putting in your response, you're just going to type the word skeleton. That tells me that you have watched video 1. Okay, so up next is video 2, in which we will talk about planes and we'll define movements.